This is the parallax effect, a phenomenon where the perceived speed and movement of objects is dependent on their distance to the observer. And it can explain most of the perspective you will ever need. I know this does not make too much sense right now, so please hold your horses and bear with me. We won't be connecting lines to seemingly random vanishing points to draw cubes and objects without context. I promise we won't have to calculate anything, although we will use some numbers to relate sizes and proportions. What we are going to do is to actually understand the roots of perspective, the fundamentals of it, so to say. Unfortunately, perspective is one of the most overlooked areas in art, as it can seem quite intimidating and frankly boring. And if you've been looking on YouTube, I do not blame you for thinking this way. Especially beginner artists struggle with its concepts and application.
Now we know the middle of our canvas, which leaves only one question open. How big can the canvas be? How far can you draw now in order to not exceed our appointed 60 degrees viewing angle? The answer to this is rule number 3, which is the formula for the radius.
Huh?
Usually, we're not being taught to think about the reason behind the perspective rules, we just follow them. Most people will be thrown off the moment the perspective gets more advanced, for example drawing stairs, drawing multiple characters, drawing buildings. Well, why is perspective so important then? When using perspective cleverly, it can immerse the audience in your words and thoughts. It makes whatever you draw rooted in reality. Concept artists, for example, need a strong understanding of it to bring the ideas into the world. Animators use it cleverly and efficiently without overcomplicating it to achieve stunning appeal and believable space. Comic and manga artists use it extensively for storytelling and world building. Even if you just want to draw cool characters and OCs, knowing practical perspective will give you the ability to place characters freely in space and make your dynamic poses even cooler. And the biggest reason, it can make or break storytelling. Take the words from Carson van Osten, a famous Disney artist who in 1975 created a slideshow for his boss at a Disney meeting in Frankfurt. It did so well that it expanded into a guide and every Disney office had a copy of it. Especially on page 7 of the Carson guide, you can see how using certain perspective can introduce all sorts of problems in drawing and storytelling. In the first panel, it's clear that the downshot reveals a lot of uninteresting or empty spaces around the characters. It doesn't really support the narrative here. A downshot can also introduce greater difficulty in drawing rectangles and circles in perspective, which will make drawing many objects harder. Sizes are also harder to judge if you have been looking from above the characters. If you put your horizon line or eye level down, it can make these scenes more appealing. The characters can now be related in size more easily. Carson also emphasizes where you might want to use a downshot. Well, it is simple. Whenever there are interesting or important things to look down at. This could be a map or any objects your character might be looking at. Carson concludes that using a low horizon line or eye level can make use of the space and impose a greater feeling of depth in many scenes. So, where do we start? We can get into perspective just by observing the world around us. If we think about way far away buildings do not seem to move much as we walk, why edges move and distort so dramatically as we get closer to them, how come every perfectly vertical edge can always be traced back to our feet? We can already get a lot closer to intuitive understanding when drawing. You won't magically understand perspective in every rule, but you will have familiarized yourself with how things distort in our reality. Ultimately, I want you to think differently about perspective and enjoy it. Let's figure out how our eyes see and discover how perspective works. Statement 1. Our eyes see in an angle. Our eyes need to see in an angle, otherwise it would have to be the same size as the things we want to see. Because our eyes are built to see in an angle, it means the area we can see increases with distance. In other words, if our vision is 1 meter tall at a certain distance, then if we move the same distance further back into space, we will now have increased the height of our vision by another meter and so on. It is the reason why you can block your entire vision with your thumb only a few centimeters away from your eye. Or when you look into the sky, you can see so many stars that are obviously light years apart from each other. Therefore, we observe that the area of our vision increases at a linear rate with distance. To demonstrate this, I will use a figure of my character as reference. As you can see, the figure to the back is just about half the visual size of the one in front, despite having the same physical size, of course. This halving in size happens for any arbitrary distance we have from the subjects, given we and the subjects are placed equally apart as seen on the side view. In this case, the foreground figure is about 10 centimeters away from the camera and the background figure is twice the distance, at around 20 centimeters, resulting in appearing half as big. Now watch what happens when I put the figure exactly 3 times the distance from the camera relative to the foreground character. If the foreground figure is still 10 centimeters away, the figure in the back is now at 30 centimeters distance. My character in the back is now only a third the height of the foreground figure we are relating to. I think you can already see a pattern here. Moving anything x times into the distance from a reference point will result in its visual size being divided by the same amount. Consequently, if we move the foreground character closer to the camera, say half the initial distance, its visual size will double. So the way objects in real life get smaller the farther away it is from you is always dependent on the relative distance they have to each other and you, the observer, or a camera. Ugh, no, not maths again, you say. Better go back to drawing characters from a 3/4 view. Oh, I've been there. I promise you won't have to calculate anything. On that thought, something unintuitive happens when we continue moving objects into the far distance. Have you ever wondered why when you're sitting in a train or car, things further into the distance, like mountains or trees in the sky, doesn't seem to be moving much, while everything close to you is passing in a blur? The same principles apply here. So we have learned that our vision increases linearly with our distance to things. Now imagine trees hundreds of meters away, taking just a small portion of your sight, meaning you can see many at once. Your effective sight expands at 60 degrees where you stand. This is a generalization we can make for drawing in perspective. The top view of the scene gives us a lot of clarity here. Watch how nearby trees are rushing from side to side as you drive past them. You notice how the background trees seem to move very slowly. But how come? The foreground trees are way closer and take much more of your sight than the background trees. Your area of vision is not very big at say a few meters distance, so the foreground trees do not stay in your vision for as long as you traverse. On the other hand, the trees on the background is still in your field of vision and will remain there for quite a bit, as your vision has now expanded hundreds of meters tall and wide. Even if we don't turn our head while focusing on something in the distance, it will remain in our vision for way longer than the close foreground elements, thus it appears to be moving more slowly. This is also the reason why the moon seems to never move, as it is astronomically far away. Your key takeaways should be: size decrease and increase of objects is not arbitrary, but follows a simple linear rule, where the relative distances of the objects and the camera observer play a crucial role. If something is very far away from us, its height and its width only take a very small portion of our vision. Consequently, it will remain in our field of vision longer when we move, thus appear to go by very slowly. The biggest and most dramatic change in size and speed happen up close to the observer and camera. When drawing, keep in mind the distances of the elements of the scene to the camera. You don't need to measure everything. Professional artists have intuitive understanding of how things change size and perspective and how they should look like. With these key takeaways, I'm sure you can already make more educated guesses. This is part 1. More perspective video will follow. Perspective is really tricky to cover in just one video. We're starting from the very fundamentals, so we can build on top of it. The next video will cover horizon lines and vanishing points. Stay tuned. If you like this video, give a like and leave a comment. I'll make sure to answer any questions. Thanks for watching.